This is Dave Hendricks. I'm the CEO of Vertalo, and I am the host of today's webinar with Alec Beckman and special guest, Gary Brandeis. So thanks a lot for coming, folks. We are seeing bucket loads of people streaming in to today's webinar, so I'm going to give everyone a minute or two to show up. And then once we get to the point where we've got enough folks on, well, we'll then kind of go through the rules and talk about what we're going to talk about today. So in the meantime, I hope that everyone had a lovely Passover Seder, or if you're a Christian, I hope you are enjoying Good Friday today. And I hope that everyone is staying safe and sane during these times. So now that it looks like we've got a high percentage of the attendees in the room, first of all, I'd like to thank you very much for attending this week's Vertalo webinar. If you're a frequent Vertalo webinar attendee or you follow our newsletter that we put out every Tuesday, you'll learn and have learned that we like to feature our partners and our clients and help them share what they're doing with our audience. Vertalo's mission is to connect and enable the digital asset ecosystem. And in order to do that, we need to work together with lots of different parties. Those parties include ATSs, exchanges, broker-dealers, custodians, KYC and AML providers, and accreditation platforms. The most important client and partner of Vertalo, however, are our licensees and their investors. Vertalo's platform, as a registered SEC registered transfer agent, connects issuers and investors in a system that enables low cost, low friction, easy to use technology to manage shareholder relationships, to manage investor relations, and to manage the relationship between the issuer, the investor, and then the sources of secondary liquidity and the custody platforms. Today, I'm joined by two fantastic guests. The first guest is Alec Beckman. Alec is president of Advantage Blockchain, a Philadelphia-based consulting company that serves as a bridge between real estate owners and value-adding blockchain solutions like Vertalo. Advantage Blockchain specializes in the end-to-end process of adding liquidity to real estate assets via tokenization. I'm also happy to announce that Advantage Blockchain is one of the most recent licensees of Vertalo's platform. So thanks for joining, Alec, and great to have you.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Alec and I are joined by one of Alec and Advantage Blockchain's clients and partners, Gary Brandeis. Gary is the president and founder of Recap Management and has more than 30 years of commercial real estate experience. Gary's experience and expertise includes development, finance, acquisitions, dispositions, asset management, and joint ventures. He has been the principal partner in 4 real estate investment funds, including PB Funds 1 and 2, investing over $350 million in all property types and investment strategies. Gary, thank you so much for joining me and Alec today. We are super excited to hear about what you've been doing, your journey in real estate and in building real estate technology solutions. So thanks for joining.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you for having me. I wish we could all be together, but this is a good alternative. So thank you.
Yes, it is a great alternative. So Gary, why don't you tell me a little bit about your experience in real estate and real estate technology and the business that you're in today?
Sure. So I guess let's 30 plus years of experience in the real estate space. I started out as a CPA that had real estate clients, and then went over to industry and became, started out on the financing side, the accounting side, the reporting side of real estate, and worked my way through the business. And I could say today, looking back 30 years, 32 years, that I've probably done just about everything that you could do in commercial real estate. And, thinking about sort of the times we're in today, almost every market, up good markets, lousy markets. And now I'm dealing with this market, which is obviously probably the most challenging environment we've ever had for commercial real estate, especially in the hospitality space where we have quite a large position. So I think I can stand here and talk about commercial real estate in good markets, down markets, and pretty much every property type, whether it's office, residential meaning apartments, large apartment properties, industrial, retail, hospitality, and so forth. So I think I could cover almost every part of the business, from everything from nuts and bolts property management up to ground up development to asset management, investment management, financing, debt, large and small. So hopefully I'll be able to answer all of your questions, because hopefully I've sort of been in all the different situations with all the different property types. In addition to that, back about 20 years ago, I got heavily involved in real estate technology when the .com technology space was becoming something to pay attention to. And at the time, internet technology, and more specifically B2B internet technology, was taking shape. There were a lot of opportunities in the real estate space because we're a very large industry, but with lots of small players. So at the time, internet technology was something new, something innovative. And at the time, I worked for a large national developer who asked me to sort of oversee their initiatives in the real estate technology space. So at the time, not only was I running the regional office for the company for the traditional parts of our real estate business, but I also became sort of the national partner for real estate technology initiatives. And we started a few .com companies in that space and a couple of other initiatives. So I think I've got a good mix of the traditional real estate experience that I mentioned earlier, but I've also run a real estate technology company whose goal it was to use internet technology, which again was new at the time back in 1999, 2000, 2001, and figure out how to use that technology to make the company better at the traditional parts of real estate. So
That's super cool.
A lot of different things that play out with the technology that's being introduced today. So, and as I started looking at blockchain technology and currency issues with blockchain, I started thinking, is this going to be a repeat of what happened 20 years ago, or is it going to be done better? So that's how we got to where we are today.
That's super cool. I might mention, folks, that Gary has been in the national real estate game for quite some time. And as a matter of fact, one of the buildings in my backdrop is a building that you worked on back some couple of years ago, correct?
Many years ago, probably, I think it was the early 90s, which was a building in Austin. Yes.
That's great. So tell us a little bit about how you went from working with centralized database real estate technologies to the blockchain, and a little bit about your affiliation and work with Fibery.
So I think because of my experience from 20 years ago, sort of merging real estate, which is really a sort of an old school business, right? Not a lot of innovation for the most part, not a lot of technology in the real estate space. It's a hard asset investment business, although there is a lot more technology in the sort of the operating side of the business today than there was certainly 20 years ago. Some of that technology came out of the .com.
I think we might have frozen on Gary. Alex?
98% of the .com business.
I think we might have frozen on you there for a second. Yep.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay, sorry. I've always been interested in sort of the intersection of traditional real estate and technology because we saw how much it could impact the traditional parts of commercial real estate back in the dot-com days. So when I started to hear about and read about blockchain technology and how it could again potentially impact commercial real estate, I self-educated myself. I started reading as much as I could. I started to talk to as many people as I could. Introduced to the Fibre Network, which is the Foundation for International Blockchain and Real Estate Expertise. It's a European-based sort of conglomerate of volunteers like me who are part of the organization and trying to connect technology and real estate and see how they might come together. So it's always been something that I've been focused on as part of our traditional real estate space. Businesses, development, acquisition, redevelopment, property management, whether it's office, hotel, retail, et cetera. So it's always something that's been part of my mindset. And as I started to learn more about blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies, I got introduced to Alec and his group, and they were doing they were doing work in that space. So to make a long story short, I engaged their company to do some more in-depth research for me to see about how we might tokenize our buildings, change the capital structure of our buildings to potentially provide liquidity in the private real estate space. So Alec and his team took that engagement, did a bunch of research for me. We brainstormed, we talked about it, and we really thought a lot about it and thought thoughtfully about it to decide whether there was a real value proposition for commercial real estate. And sort of what came out of that process was that blockchain technology was very innovative, very powerful, and has a lot of applications within commercial real estate, things that can add a lot of value and automate things, make things easier, less paper intensive, less intermediary based, and could take a lot of manual processes out of what we typically do in the traditional parts of our business. But what I saw as the biggest opportunity was the liquidity provision or the liquidity opportunity that could come out of it. And that's really what got me excited about it. That's what really got me interested in digging deeper into the opportunity and using sort of what I learned 20 years ago during .com and said, listen, if this has real possibility, you need practitioners, people like me who live and work every day in commercial real estate and do the traditional things of commercial real estate. You sort of have to get some early backing. You have to get some early buy-in from those folks to really make sure this can work and make sure it can add a lot of value.
Yeah,
that's how we got to where we are today.
That's fantastic, and that's a great segue for us to introduce our other guest on the webinar today, Alec Beckman. Alec, how are you doing today? How's Philly?
Philly's great. You know, we're just taking it day by day. The quarantine's got us inside, but everything's good.
Super. So tell us about your relationship with Gary and Recap and how we got involved and how you see the market unfolding and what's exciting about this to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we started Advantage Blockchain in the beginning of 2018, you know, we were looking for essentially high value propositions for you know, regular business owners and where they could implement blockchain solutions that can really be game changers for their business. So one place that one area that we really saw pretty early, probably a year and a half ago when we started to talk to Gary about this was in real estate, because we saw, you know, real estate is a traditionally illiquid market. You know, it's backed by a lot of paper-based processes. It's kind of almost stuck in the past, if you will, as compared to other asset classes. And so we saw a real opportunity there with blockchain. One of the biggest things that Gary mentioned, obviously, is liquidity. And you know, we were really interested in the idea of taking these illiquid assets and, you know, adding some sort of liquidity solution to them. So, you know, by liquidity, what we're talking about is packaging equity in assets, any asset, in this case, real estate, and packaging it as a tradable security, which, can be tradable online. We're trying to simplify the ease of transfer. And then other liquidity solutions that we're looking into and that we think are pretty low-hanging fruit would be to borrow against tokenized equity. So, we're looking at all sorts of solutions for liquidity for a formerly illiquid market. And, that's where we started the focus on real estate is Advantage Blockchain. Gary, being somewhat of a pioneer, he was big in the .com days, and he's willing to take a chance on this sort of technology. We thought it was smart to engage him, bring him on as a partner. And what we're trying to do now is connect to as many real estate owners and as many players in the space to help us take the real estate world digital.
That's fantastic. So tell us a little bit about some of the projects that you two are going to work on in the near term, and how you see the market growing from early adopters like Gary.
Yeah, so with Gary, we are exploring tokenizing a few buildings as a part of his portfolio. With real estate, there's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of moving parts that go into it. So with Gary, he's got a few little kinks he's got to work out to make the deal as attractive as possible. Because what we're trying to do is provide, as early movers in the space, we're trying to provide attractive assets that are going to attract investors to the space. If we, if we're trying to open up the space with, not very attractive assets, short-term leases, whatever it may be, that's not going to bring real estate investors or any investors actually to the space. So, we're exploring a bunch of different tokenization options with Gary. In terms of the market, I mean, this is so new. This is such an early process that, the amount of real estate assets that have actually been tokenized are under 20. And so this is such a new space and such a new frontier that, we're really trying to almost be the guinea pigs in this situation, so we can really figure out, how, we're trying to create almost like a sellable product where we are, where we can really plug in an asset and really figure out, on every single level, what do we need to do here to make this an asset that's right for tokenization.
So I want to take that and lead back to Gary and say, Gary, tell us, what are the challenges and the opportunities? What are the barriers to digitizing these private real estate assets? What does a real estate owner need to do to assess whether this makes sense for them, to make it real? And then what do you see as the couple primary benefits, and as well as the biggest obstacles that you have to overcome?
So the biggest opportunity is to sort of redesign the capital stack of an investment property, whether it's an office property, an apartment property. There's typically what we call a capital stack. So part of the capital stack that makes up the full value of the building is part debt, and mostly debt and equity. And sometimes there's variations of equity. You could have preferred equity, standard equity. You might have a first piece of debt and a mezzanine piece of debt. So it can be simple and just be debt and equity. It could be more complex with various layers of different debts and equities. But if we stick with a standard debt and equity structure, the opportunity is to create in private real estate, which 99% of the real estate owned in the United States, as an example, is owned in single purpose entities, privately held by individual investors. And that individual investor could be a family office that's investing family money. It could be an individual, a single person that wants to diversify their personal investment portfolio. It could be a pension fund. It could be, a number of other different type of equity investors. And on the debt side, you typically have banks or lenders, sometimes hedge funds or lenders, but typically they hold a first mortgage position in the property and they have a lien in the property. So they essentially are, even though they don't call themselves that, they have a vested interest in the asset, and for a fixed period of time are almost a part owner of the building with you, although their opportunity is limited to the interest that you have to pay them for the loan. So essentially the opportunity here, and for guys like me who own real estate in private ventures, is to allow my equity investors and my partners in those deals to, and instead of holding a piece of paper that identifies their interest in that property, that they can eventually hold a token that is backed and valued by the hard asset it represents, the interest in that asset that it represents, and then at some point allow them to trade that token, whether for cash or other things that could be traded for on a active trading platform, which you'd be much more, you can explain that better than I can. But so the idea is that in my world, in the private real estate world, if I've got 10 investors or 20 or 30 investors in an investment fund, they're locked in, meaning they can't sell their interest actively. They're sort of locked in with me and my fund or me and my property until such time that we decide to sell or refinance or something to that effect. So by changing the method in which those equity investors would invest in property and give them options to get in and out of that investment, that's the real opportunity. That not only adds value to the property, it adds value to the process, and it gives those investors something you can only get right now through publicly traded REITs that are traded on either the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ. But that typically is a portfolio of properties. You don't get the direct benefits of investing in real estate that you do through structures that we manage, like private investments, where you get a tax statement from me at the end of each year. You get the benefit of depreciation, loss carry forwards, and things like that. So by bringing liquidity to the equity portion of that capital stack, changes my business significantly, allows me to offer something to my investors that really hasn't ever been offered before. And it opens up a lot more doors for me to potentially to raise more equity for new deals or private funds that I may want to do in the future. So it really changes, if this all happens and it becomes a reality, which it looks like it is, it really is a material game changer for commercial real estate investing. And so that's really the positives. The potential pitfalls really revolve around how active will the trading platforms be, and that will dictate how liquid these assets can and will be. That's the number one thing we don't know yet. And secondly, we have to make sure that we work within the compliance issues of government. So as a private investor that manages partnerships with different investors in it, making sure that I'm adhering to IRS regulations, making sure that I'm adhering to SEC regulations, and so forth. So when you sort of flip this investment model on its head and change the way people invest with us, we're still going to have to be compliant with both the IRS and the SEC. So that's going to be something that we're going to lean on folks like you, Dave, to help us with.
Yeah, we're looking forward to working through the regulatory issues such as they are. And with Reg D securities, for example, there aren't really that many regulatory issues. Frankly, private assets can trade electronically. And we're looking forward to expanding the business models that you can offer when these tools and technologies are widely available. So speaking of enabling new business models with new tools and technologies, I wanted to give some of the attendees an opportunity to ask questions of my guests here. And the first person is Mason. Mason, I'm going to give you the ability to ask our panelists here questions that you put into the chat. Would you like to do that, Mason?
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing all of your great insights with us. So I just had a quick question around that. It's a phenomenal idea to kind of use the power of blockchain and smart contracts and the decentralized world to be able to monetize hard assets like buildings and bring more liquidity to the market. I was wondering if how you guys envision the engagement from the investors, and if there are any concerns in terms of the using blockchain, and do you guys use fully decentralized solutions, or you're kind of looking at more closed loop, semi-decentralized blockchain technologies to be able to enable this market?
Alec, would you like to talk a little bit about the technology? I can certainly weigh in on that, but if you'd like to hop in, Alec, and Gary, of course, you too.
Yeah, sorry, Mason, you cut out a little bit for me. Could you repeat the question again? Sorry.
So my question was basically, do you guys harness decentralized blockchain technologies in terms of bringing liquidity to the market, or you guys are using more semi-decentralized solutions like Corda or some other applications that have been adopted by banking and financial sectors?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for your question, Mason. So I think it's important to remember here that we're working with securities, and with securities, you can never really get fully decentralized. We can use the great decentralization, benefits of blockchain, such as, having a ledger, a decentralized ledger that can never be changed or erased to record transactions, or, having the actual blockchain decentralized technology behind a centralized system is kind of how this works, because with security tokens, everything needs to be fully compliant and fully transparent. So while we're using the blockchain benefits of decentralization, these tokens will actually not be decentralized. They'll all be centralized. And I think this is an important thing to kind of get in the head of real estate owners. This starts with the general partner, the person who's making not always the general partner, but the person who's making decisions on the assets. So the decision maker is going to have some sort of centralized control and governance over the property, because it's an offering and it's treated as a security.
Yeah, and let me add something to that, so that the words decentralization and centralization mean different things to different folks. So these are not open source real estate DAOs, which have no leadership and are governed entirely by smart contracts. What we are doing is we are taking the ownership of the asset, the GP and the LP's ownership, and we're taking that from a certificated paper proxy-based ownership model to a direct ownership model, where the shares are maintained in investors' wallets and then are subject to the right, under certain restrictions, to be bought and sold on regulated ATSs, such as at our partner T0. So the offering itself is managed by a general partner like Gary. All of Gary's properties, when people invest in them, sign on to a purchase agreement. Okay, it's a contract between two parties, and that purchase agreement, that PPM, the private placement memorandum, is one of the documents which governs the relationship between the parties like Gary and his investors. In that way, it is substantially identical to any other form of private investment. The difference is that once you sign that PPM and once you're on this ledger, subject to the PPM, you have the right to buy and sell that asset on a specific venue or venues like T0. And so hopefully, and whatever those venues, whatever regulations those venues operate under, that governs the transaction of that asset. Mason, does that help cover it?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that was great. Thank you.
Super. If you guys don't mind, we're going to move to another guest. Sam Key is on the line. Okay.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you,
Yes.
Sam. How are you?
Yeah, fine. I'm extremely interested in this whole situation, but I got a few questions. First of all, the whole idea has been around for the last couple of years, and I went to meetups in Los Angeles where there's speeches about it and all that. It's for the last 2 years, but for some strange reason, nothing is really happening. And actually, most of these groups disappeared. That's one question. So do you have an idea why is this whole idea is not moving on? And the other question is, do you think that because of the current virus situation, which will cause a lot of mayhem in the real estate situation, this whole idea of what you're doing is going to actually move forward finally?
So I'll take the first question, and then I'm going to loop Gary in here if Gary doesn't mind. The reason why this has not moved forward more quickly is very, very simple. It wasn't because it's not a great idea. It's because that great idea needed to be enabled and activated by connected technologies. You couldn't just have a token issuance platform. You couldn't just have an exchange or an ATS. You actually had to have a data management platform that could manage the tokenized or digital ownership of these offerings. So until those mature, and my company Vertalo is precisely that kind of digital transfer agent. We're SEC registered. We connect to the T0s of the world, the custodians of the world, the KYC AML platforms of the world. Before platforms like ours were connected to platforms like T0 and enabled the issuer, meaning Gary, to manage his cap stack, to manage his investor base like he could in a spreadsheet and facilitate the trading electronically. You couldn't take those great ideas and make them reality. It's only because of parties like Gary, like Alec and the advanced blockchain team, like the team at T0, like our partners at Prime Trust and Vertalo, working together, that this can actually become a reality. It's not, there's not a single place.
This is a reminder. Real estate questionnaire.
Excellent. So that is a great, I don't know what that was, but that was certainly interesting. So it's only because that this is a team sport and that the team needed to assemble on the field. We were not fielding a team before. We are now fielding a team, and it makes these opportunities possible. Gary, why haven't you done it until today? Tell me your answer to that question.
Well, I think one, we have an existing portfolio with lots of investors, right? And again, from an individual to a trust and a state to a pension plan, et cetera. So the question isn't why we haven't done it. The question is when's the best time to do it, right? So the challenge for real estate, there's a couple of challenges, but one of the biggest challenges is that the people that typically invest with us like to invest in real estate. They understand the benefits of it. The idea of investing in real estate through this technology platform is going to take some time to educate the investor, educate the idea behind it, why we're doing it, how it works, if and when there's an active trading platform, how that's going to work. So it's really an education process to educate not only folks like me, although I think I may be a little bit ahead of most real estate people just because I've done some technology things, but there's a lot of education that's going to have to happen in the real estate space. And then there has to be a real value proposition. And to me, the technology's great. The back of the house automation is great. But the real end value is the liquidity opportunity that we see as an end result to all of these technology things that are going to come together to allow us to have liquidity in a regulated, approved way. And then lastly, I think it's a two-step process, right? The first step for us is to get our information, our smart contracts, our cap table in this type of system, right? And have it loaded and locked and ready to go. And then when such a time comes where there is active trading, we can literally just jump from where we are today into that active trading platform. So it's something that's going to take a little bit of time to do. We'd like to get a head start and have properties on these platforms and ready to go, and then sort of educate our investors during that time. And then as we think about raising new capital, I think this is going to be something that we look at very closely to see if it's a way that we can raise new capital for new projects and new deals. So I don't necessarily think there's a reason why it hasn't happened. I just think that doing anything in commercial real estate takes time. Unfortunately, it's a old line business. It's a hard asset business. And unfortunately, nothing happens really that quickly in real estate, certainly not as quickly as other industries.
Yeah, and certainly liquidity doesn't happen very quickly, and that's something that we're trying to fix.
Yes.
You had another question a few minutes ago about the effect of COVID-19 on this, and so wanted to make sure that we covered off on that. I can tell you that our business has accelerated actually with this, and the desire for parties to get liquidity from these amazing assets. That's certainly a real-time effect. What are you seeing, Gary?
So obviously all of our properties have been significantly impacted by the virus and the pandemic and all the regulations that we have in place, both at the state level and the federal level. You know, we have buildings that are closed. We've had to furlough a lot of employees that work in our hotel properties. We've had 2 construction projects stop because of governor orders stopping construction projects to help slow the spread. So we've been materially impacted on the real estate side, both open properties, active properties, construction projects. Unfortunately, our hotel business has taken a significant hit on the revenue side, and we're trying to manage that as best we can. But again, I think it's markets like this, and we've never seen anything like this before. But when you look at the ebbs and flows, the highs and lows of a cyclical real estate market, and there's always going to be highs and lows. This is a real low. Hopefully it's a low for a short period of time. But when we get into these types of situations, we rely on a couple of things. One, we rely on the fact that hopefully we have really good assets that have value regardless of some financial downturn or economic downturn or societal downturn. This is a society type downturn, not an economic downturn from the standpoint of where it started. So we feel that we have really good assets, really good real estate, that when things sort of start to come back in the economy, our assets will be ready to take advantage of that. So that's the first thing that we try to do. The second thing that we do in a market like this is we try to figure out how to make sure that our company is stronger and smarter, so that if and when and something like this happens again, hopefully it doesn't, but if it does, we can be better prepared. And I think one way that we can be better prepared and certainly provide value to our investors is this liquidity option. So for example, we might have an investor in one of our buildings who likes to invest in real estate. They like how our assets are performing. They like the dividends that we're able to distribute, but for other reasons, they need some cash. They need money to pay the bills. They need money to pay college tuition that they thought they were going to have from somewhere else, and maybe they don't have it right now. Unfortunately, in our current environment, the private real estate industry with limited partnerships and LLCs and GPs like me, there's virtually no way for them to create liquidity in their real estate investments. So so if we can create this liquid environment in private real estate, we've really changed the whole idea of investing in private real estate. Now, I'm not saying it would be a good time to sell. And I think we want to look at it the same way you look at the stock market. So a lot of financial people say, hey, don't panic. If you're a long-term investor, hold on to your assets and let's ride this out. And that's an option for some but an option, not an option for others. So I think, again, the option of liquidity is going to add value. A lot of our investors might love the opportunity for liquidity. They may never take it. It's going to be up to them, and it's going to be up to their personal situation. But in this environment, at least they have that option. In our current environment, they don't have that option.
Right, and this is a pretty big market, so so there's going to be people who feel strongly about wanting to get out, and people are going to feel strongly about seeing this as a buying opportunity. And
Absolutely.
And ultimately, what we want to do is we want to facilitate a marketplace, and that's why we work with secondary market providers like T0, who can facilitate a marketplace so that these buyers and sellers can find each other. And that's a big part of the work that we do with folks like Gary and Advantage. So Alec, we've got a question for you from Jack McDonald, and then John Quirk, we're going to go to you after that. Jack asked, curious to hear from Alec what tech stack service providers they're looking to work with to tokenize real estate assets.
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, our technology platform provider is Vertalo. So as Advantage Blockchain, we act as the official onboarding and consulting arm for their Vertalo Real Estate platform. That's their VRE platform. So first and foremost, as the transfer agent and issuance platform that we work with is Vertalo. We work with other players in the space, like Dave said. This space will only work if we can get a whole bunch of different players to work together. So we are working with, but not exclusive to, a whole bunch of other different partners, such as compliance partners. We're talking to a few different compliance partners. Compliance in this process takes care of the KYC, which is Know Your Customer, AML, which is anti-money laundering, and accreditation. As a general partner, you don't want to give your limited partners to sell to just anyone, and the SEC requires the investors to be accredited investors. So this is a process that is needed. It's a technology and service provider that we need in the space to show who is a good investor, who is a qualified investor. As the general partner, does Gary want someone investing in his property that has some sort of that's had some sort of issue in the past? And that's the reports you get with compliance. Other partners that we're looking to work with are secondary market providers. So those look like ATSs, such as Dave mentioned, Zero, Open Finance is another one. There's a few more. And then we're also looking to work with secondary market providers that are broker dealers, so we can do more peer-to-peer deals in terms of offline capabilities with secondary market providers. And we're also looking to work with funds that loan against tokenized equity, so we can provide other forms of liquidity for our clients. And so one of the important things to think about with Advantage Blockchain is we're serving as the bridge between real estate owners and the value-adding blockchain solutions. So we are looking to partner with as many technology providers in the space as possible. But as far as our issuance platform and digital transfer agent, that is Vertalo.
Thanks for that. We're excited to work with you all and Gary. So thanks for being on today. John Quirk wanted to ask a question. So John, you've got the talking stick.
Yeah, I'm just curious, given Gary's background in this space for so long, would there be a link between the blockchain trading environment and the underlying asset financials? There are multiple places you could obviously put that technology, but how would I know what I'm trading in and where that asset stands? For example, a hotel in this climate, how would I know what the financials are behind that asset?
Well, sure. I think we would look at it in a very similar way that we handle our investors now. So for our company in particular, we're very transparent with our investors. So we do a lot of financial reporting. We do a lot of updating. So we would provide the same level of information through the platform that's managing the tokens and the investor base. So that might mean monthly financials, quarterly financials, annual financials, and tax returns and tax statements, as well as updates on, for example, in the environment we're in today, we're communicating even more with our investors and letting them know what we're doing to protect our investments and protect our assets during this very unique environment. So we as a company tend to over communicate with our investors, and that tends to get us good marks from our investors. And that sometimes is good news about things that are happening in our assets, and sometimes it's not so good news, right? I wish I could say to everybody that's listening, every deal I've ever done has been a home run grand slam deal. They haven't been. So what we try to do is we try to communicate about everything. And if there is an issue, if something's not going the way we want it to go, we tell you. But we also like to tell you sort of what our plan is to fix it or to get it moving back into the right direction. So I believe in this new environment that we've been talking about, our investors, or those folks that would hold the tokens, that would be backed, and the value of those tokens be backed by the value of the real estate from which that token is the owner of, or a percentage owner of, is that we would provide the same level of information. You would know how the property's doing, what the revenue is, what the distributions are, what the tax situation is, et cetera, et cetera. So we wouldn't really change anything about how we operate the assets. We would still operate them in a way that is transparent, but also, to maximize value, maximize cash flow in a fiduciary way with our investors, whether they're investors as they exist today, on a piece of paper, or if they exist in a tradable token, we would look at it the same way.
Would you see a link? Would you see some type of link between the blockchain market and your information?
Well, actually, Gary, let me take this one for you, because that's actually a capability in our system, such that the issuer, the GP, the controller of the fund or property can actually link to those documents, data rooms, and other resources, similar resources, right from our system. So now there's obviously two communities, right? There's the existing investor community, who's already connected to Gary via our system, and they can always go into the portal and click through and go to Gary's data room. Then on the other side, there are the investors who might want to buy through a regulated ATS like T0 or OFN. They will have to do their own discovery. They're going to end up in the same place once they've passed an accredited investor check, that they are actually able to look at an open offering. They will then be able to see the documents. Now, overall, the system is meant to increase visibility into both price, market, and market-driven price, but also the underlying documents, while staying compliant with disclosure regulations and also 506B and C as to who is broad-based promotion and other kinds of restrictions on sharing data with non-accredited investors, et cetera. So it's a great question. It's not one which we could cover in less than probably 10 minutes, but there are systems and compliance and regulations in place for sharing this information in a way which makes sense for investors and issuers.
Thank you.
Thanks for that question, John. So we are coming up to just 10 minutes before the hour. And I want to make sure that there's been a very, very vibrant conversation in the chat, by the way. And I really want to thank everybody for visiting today and participating in this webinar. This is an ongoing conversation. The market is developing. It's accelerating through Corona COVID. It's being led by practitioners like Gary. and partners like Alec. And I want to make sure that I'm opening up the question channel for anyone else before I let Alec and Gary close up.
I think I would close up by saying, you know, this is an early adopter environment. So you know, the folks that have done it already, and the folks that are considering it, such as myself, you know, we're going to be careful. We're going to take our time to make sure we understand everything, how it's going to impact our current investors, how we might attract new investors, and how we potentially provide that liquidity for private real estate investment that's never existed before. And to me, that's the big opportunity here. So we're gonna do it carefully, methodically, and make sure that we're doing the right thing, certainly for our current investors, and making sure that everything that they recognize and understand stays in place, but try to make it better. If we can get it done, if guys like Alec and Dave and that side of this equation to develop an end-to-end technology source or platform that can allow me to do the things that we've talked about, wow, right? Wow. That's really going to be a game changer for me and for anyone that is in the commercial real estate business. Unless, you know, with the exception of if you're already a publicly traded REIT, which there are quite a few, but when you look at the percentage of real estate that publicly traded REITs own versus all the real estate either in the US or across the globe, it's a very, very small percentage. So the market opportunity here for me and a company of my size, companies smaller and obviously companies a lot larger, is really, excuse me, is potentially, it's just hard for me to extrapolate how big the opportunity is and how impactful it could be.
Super exciting. It's such a joy to work with somebody like you who is rubber meets the road and thinking about the applications for this technology. Alec, and would you like to add any closing comments before I wrap this up? And thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we're really excited to be in this space. We see a lot of value add for real estate owners, for, you know, any real private asset that has suffered from inefficiencies and illiquidity in the past. And yeah, I just wanted to reiterate, you know, as Advantage Blockchain, we are the company that serves as the bridge between real estate owners like Gary and technology providers like Vertalo. And so we're trying to just add value to real estate owners in any way possible. And, you know, we're trying to make this simple. We're trying to take the fundamentals of real estate and, you know, turn it digital, make it simple, make make transfer of ownership easy. You know, these are things that, these are all different, you know, factors that apply to so many different assets, and it's time to get real estate there.
It's great. Alec, thank you for joining us today. Gary, really great to have you. Your experience is priceless for the folks on this call. I want to thank the guests, the webinar attendees for taking time from what's a holiday for some of you and to spend all this time with us. And this webinar will be available. Has been recorded and will be available on www.vertalo.com next week. I'm Dave Hendricks. You can reach me on the internet at Dave Hendricks in pretty much any way you'd like. And I hope to see you again on one of our next webinars or in an email. So thanks again. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.